Just to introduce the panel, there's myself. I'm the chair of the Green Talent Award Programme, senior lecturer at Nottingham Business School, and I take a keen interest as a practitioner and academic in sustainability. Okay, my background, very simply, I worked in sustainability for PLC companies and small, medium-sized companies in waste management, waste recycling, waste to energy, be involved in mineral extraction, creating wetlands, and I've been involved in creating different types of construction materials from waste arisings, and I've been involved in major waterway, the rebirth and restoration of waterways and their ecological biodiversity and how they're restored and reinstated. And I'm involved in various startups in the theme of sustainability, and keen to teach it within finance and accounting, and looking at ways of sustainably funding and financing ventures through aspects such as social impact bonds. So I take a keen interest and continue to sort of be involved in this environment where we can create a network internationally. And I've spent most of my time working overseas. Okay, I'll take you on to our next panelist, who can introduce themselves.
Hi, thank you, Rob, for starting this session. My name is Faisal Ahmed. I'm currently working as a professor of international business and management at Leeds University Business School. I'm also the head of department for IB International Business Department. And also I'm the director of James E. Lynch India and South Asia Business Center. One of the vision and strategic priorities of the center is enhancing sustainability in South Asian context. It's a pleasure to join with my colleague, Robert Hartley and Kevin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for inviting me to participate in this panel. My name is Kevin Whittington-Jones. I'm a lead impact and ESG specialist at a investment manager, MIROVA, based in Paris. I'm based in the UK office. So I've been with MIROVA as an ESG specialist for the last 5 years, working across different investment funds, focusing specifically on the development and the financial support of natural capital projects around the world. So these are anything from sustainable farming practices through to restoration of ecosystems. And prior to joining MIROVA, I was an ESG consultant, originally based in South Africa, working primarily up through the African continent, mostly in forestry plantations, mining, large-scale commercial agriculture. Also started doing a little bit of work in Bangladesh for European Development Finance institutions, and also worked as an ESG specialist for the World Bank in a consulting role for a lot of the work that they were doing in the Middle East. So, yeah, great to be part of this afternoon session.
Okay, so everybody, you have a flavour of ourselves in terms of the panelists today. Just to give you our sort of overview of the vision and mission in terms of Edupro and also the Green Talent Award Programme. Edupro is a professional body that sort of very much links specialist practitioners to the skills that they require, but there is a real alignment to sustainability. What you find is in a lot of educational platforms, sustainability is embedded, and sort of a little bit of an afterthought in a host of programs, whether that be strategy, HR, operational management, finance, accounting. But in the Edupro offering, it is very much at the forefront of their design. And this is demonstrated by the Green Talent Award Programme that we are launching this year. In terms of our reach of Edupro, Well, it is very global. It's over a host of centres, which we are in all continents, and we are operating various centres that operate at different levels from level 3 all the way to level 7, giving opportunities for learners to develop in their professional genres. And so it's has real global reach. We're very proud of what Edupro have done, and they have partnered strategically with lots of different institutions in further education and higher education to allow learners to provide access to the host of educational platforms. So the learning pathways, as I suggest, go across all levels, and we provide opportunities where, when you're taking these programs, you can link to a professional practitioner and a specialist. The learning pathways in the UK, this is a UK-based business which is operating globally, has allowed us to set up strategic partnerships at various universities. So, for example, the Green Talent Award programme is sponsored by Leeds University and hosted by Leeds University for the final. But in addition to that, across the geographical location of the UK, we have partners with universities such as Huddersfield, Southampton, Solent, and West England University. And also we have strategic partnerships through, for example, my own university, NTU, where we are a PRME champion. Next slide, please. So you can see that the critical mass of what we do is we partner and collaborate with many professional bodies, many networks, to ensure that we get a rich array of input into sustainability. And this is very much about those that have been previous learners, alumni, these that are existing learners, these are academics, these are practitioners, and these are specialists. And so I think this is what gives the uniqueness to Edupro and the Green Talent Award programme, is that you're getting real global reach of everybody's experience in sustainability. Next slide, please. So, why youth innovation matters now? Well, I think we can debate that, but it's pretty obvious that if we're going to make a change, the change has to come from the bottom up. And so what we're finding, particularly if you look at the outcome of last year, the winners of the Green Talent Award programme was a school in the Philippines to instigate a recycling initiative on an educational platform. So we realise that we're having to change habits. We realise that we have to change behaviours. And we realise that the ambassadors going forward are those learners that can make an impact. And it is all very much about an impact that delivers not just outputs, but outcomes. So youth matters, and it's very much at the forefront of our vision and our strategy to engage people like yourselves on this call to make a difference. Next slide, please. Nature-based solutions and new pathways to projects. I'm going to call in Kevin on this because Kevin is the specialist and the expert on nature-based solutions and the ESG. And Kevin, if you could just give your sort of input onto the question raised.
So, I mean, yeah, I think nature-based solutions have been around for a long time, but what we're seeing over the last couple of years is a real increase in interest in these types of solutions in terms of, being a cost-effective way of addressing some of the sustainability problems that we're seeing. So, the beauty of nature-based solutions is that you get a dual win, in the sense of typically there's significant benefits for the environment, whether local species, climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, but also typically they are linked with significant benefits to local communities as well. So you almost have this two-pronged benefit approach through natural natural capital type projects. This is also the kind of the secret sauce, if you like, to a long-term sustainable venture. So you're having a community that's thriving based on an initiative, and at the same time you're having a successful business that is reaching those different objectives as well, whichever those might be. So whether they be for the promoters of the business, whether they're for investors, everybody has slightly different objectives, but with the nature-based solution projects, it's possible to meet the objectives of multiple different stakeholders.
Hi, Rob. Just continue with the questions. Yeah.
I think probably Fakrul what we'll do is we'll ask some specific questions which we can relate to our specialisms. So I think we have a series of questions for Kevin, Faisal, and myself. Are you able to sort of ask them and we can pick them up?
Right. Kevin, as you have worked extensively in the ESG and nature-based solutions, how do you see young innovators contributing to meaningful ESG outcomes on the ground?
I think it's an interesting question. The beauty of the green economy is that the scope is extremely broad, which means that, it provides an opportunity for individuals with a huge diversity of skills and interests to participate in the sector. So whether that be individuals with, legal training, financial training as ecological specialists, sociologists, anthropologists, all of these skills need to be brought together typically to have a successful, nature-based solution or a sustainable green economy business. And I think if you look at the youth today, there's that combination of creativity, I think increased awareness of social sustainability and social justice, combined with sort of an increasing tech savviness, which actually places kind of the youth as in the ideal situation to be, disruptors to kind of regular business models, and and that can certainly give them significant competitive advantage over kind of more traditional operations and businesses. And I think other types of roles we've seen, Greta Thunberg, for example. I think the youth is particularly active in terms of advocacy and awareness. There's also roles for, as we discussed, entrepreneurs that are interested in looking at sustainable business models, whether that be boutique cafes focusing on sustainable coffee sourcing, or recycling businesses with a focus on bringing women into the formal economy. So many different examples of entrepreneurial opportunities in the green economy space. And then also in terms of education and skills development, a lot of changes can be brought around young innovators contributing to training and capacity building in a sort of a fresh way. So I think the short answer is there's so many different opportunities, and these need to be grabbed.
Thank you very much, Rob.
I think we will ask Faisal a question now, if that's okay. And the question for Faisal, particularly with having a sort of young ambassadors on the call, you've studied sustainability in a global business context. What unique role do you think young innovators can play in shaping a greener global market?
Thank you, Rob, for your question. I think the young innovators, they are already reshaping the greener global market through ideas that we often overlook in different ways. So there are initiatives where they're using a smart textile dyeing system, which can help the textile industries and garments industries in South Asia, including India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So they are quite uniquely positioned to shape this greener global market. because they bring fresh ideas. They are tech savvy. They have different digital skills that some of the senior executives and entrepreneurs don't have. And a lot of them are using a values-driven mindset and business models that can address a lot of the challenges we have built up over the last 3-4 decades. So unlike previous generations, today's youth view sustainability not as an add-on, but as a fundamental requirement for bringing competitiveness or distinctiveness in the business model or in the product or services that they provide. So circular supply chains, low carbon business model, community-centric solutions, which large firms often struggle to design internally. Young entrepreneurs are much more comfortable in addressing these issues using new technologies, AI, Internet of Things, that can address some of these problems. So in my view, I think they are in a much better position compared to probably our generations to address and in shaping the green global market.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Faisal. That brings us on nicely to, you mentioned green entrepreneurs, and what we found in the 2025 program is a lot of these projects had go live. They're real projects, and some of these Green Talent Award learners are looking at the opportunities to create not just careers, but to create new ventures. So a question for Kevin: in your experience of funding and finance, many of these youth-led projects face funding barriers. And from your climate finance perspective, what can make a youth-led sustainability venture truly investment ready?
Thanks, Rob. So I think to some extent the investment readiness depends on the nature of the investors. So, I think whether you're looking at a more conventional venture capital type investor, which is, perhaps interested or put a greater emphasis on, high return on investment and a relatively quick return on investment, or whether you're talking about investors with a more philanthropic or patient capital approach, where, perhaps the expectations on return on investment are not as ambitious. So typically there would be the normal kind of financial considerations. There would be things around robustness of the business model, scalability, whether the market research has been done, strong financials. But I think, other things that are important to consider, things like a very clear value proposition. So, whether the proponents are able to very clearly demonstrate, how their business differentiates and addresses, a sustainability challenge, and their conviction towards, addressing that challenge. Also to look very closely at team competencies. I think what I said earlier was that, the green economy space has, it can accommodate a variety of skill sets, but I think it's more than accommodate. I think, a successful venture would typically require, in fact, a combination of different skills, woven together into a highly competent project team. And so that's, the other types of things we look at: a combination of financial skills combined with technical skills, marketing skills, etc. I think a very clear understanding of what the risks the venture is likely to take and what the risk mitigation strategies are, and how realistic those risk mitigation strategies can be. And I think something that's a little bit overlooked maybe is partnerships and support networks. And I think this is where, NGOs and universities can play a critical role and give credibility to, particularly to a new business venture, where you're looking to attract more, mature investors.
Thanks, Kevin. Now that leads me on, Faisal, to a question of what Kevin is sort of is not highlighted is obviously getting a business case, getting the business investment ready, the philanthropic nature of venture capitalists, seeing not-for-profit ventures as a way to to create new opportunities, the support of the charities. But one of the things that Kevin was sort of looking at is the sort of localized opportunities where an individual can create a sustainable project proposition within their own communities. So a question for yourself is, we're seeing these emerging markets facing both environmental drivers and development challenges to improve the sustainable credentials. But what opportunities do you see through youth-led innovation to create inclusive, localized solutions? There's a lot of innovation that is instigated in sustainability, new products, new services, new approaches. So how do you're sitting in there in the academic environment of knowledge transfer programs, KTPAs, you're seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of ventures. What's your viewpoint on how youth-led innovation can create inclusive, localized solutions?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is quite crucial to understand that some of the innovation that we have in the UK or in the US, we cannot transfer those innovation to resolve the problems in Africa or South Asia. So what I would suggest is that those markets, emerging markets, they look at frugal innovation. There is a whole lot of research and literature on frugal innovation, which basically means that you look at an innovation that was developed probably in the US or in the UK, then you try to adopt and create a cost-effective model or product or service using the same principle, but localized based on the resources and the need of the emerging market. So we have a professor from University of Cambridge, Professor Jaideep Prabhu. He is one of the leading authority in frugal innovation, and throughout his research, he was trying to find out how people are solving day-to-day problems in local communities in emerging market using frugal innovations. Those products, those expensive technologies are expensive, and there are a lot of patent protection. And sometimes even if you want to import or use those technologies, you can't afford it. So access to finance is a big barrier. But what a lot of people are doing, especially the young entrepreneurs, is coming up with solutions that are based on the local needs, using local resources and talents, and solving a problem at a local level. It can be agriculture related. It can be education related. It can be learning different technology, AI technologies and others. But they cannot copy and paste the innovation that we have here and implement it in those. So I would say frugal innovation is the answer. Right.
Excellent. Right. Faisal, another question for you. Mm-hmm. And this leads on to what you've just said. Your opening gambit to this was about the US and the driver of innovations in the US. But my experience and Kevin's experience and your experience is being a little bit worldwide and working in lots of different places in the world. Sustainability has been with us for many, 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 many years. And if you go into if you go into parts of Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, we might address them as emerging countries. They've been practicing sustainability. They've used local materials. They've built local materials to build their houses. They've been operating fisheries and arable farms in a very sustainable manner, but it hasn't been recognized. It's been their innovation. So the question for you is, sustainability is often seen as a Western business agenda. And we have learned a lot. We should be learning a lot from different continents. So how do we globalize that thinking in a way that empowers youth in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America? How did we do it in the Green Talent Award Program 2025? How are Edupro doing it? How are Leeds doing it? How are consultants doing it? What is your viewpoint on that?
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very interesting question. So I think part of the problem we have is this westernized version of sustainability, which limits its reach and ability to resolve the global problem. So I think we need to first change the mindset that the sustainability is a global issue. It's not a Western issue. And therefore, the definition and the measurement and the techniques that we use, it has to be applicable globally, not just from one perspective. I think what we need is storytelling. So you mentioned about Malaysia. I have seen lifestyles which were sustainable when I was a young kid back in Bangladesh, where every year during winter, our grandparents will sit down and take all the discarded clothing and stitch them together and create a blanket which you can use during winter to protect yourself from the winter, cold. So this patchwork was traditional in West Bengal, in East Bengal, in Bengal areas when the British went and looked at different type of arts and different types of product services. They found that this is a very traditional way of creating discarded clothes, recycled, circular economy concept was there. With the fast fashion, with the industrialization, we killed all these sustainable practices and created problem in the name of modernization, in the name of development. So I think we need to look at the definition of development. What does it actually mean? Again, because what we have done in the last 50 years, we created unsustainable business model, unsustainable living standards in the name of development. So a lot of these stories are still there. And I think somebody needs to start telling the stories that we have always lived with the nature. We did not discard nature. We knew how to live with the natural world, with animals, providing them fresh milk, chicken, eggs. Everything was sustainable. But when we started mass scale farming, we created an environment where chickens are just standing 24 hours and producing the eggs, which are very unhealthy. But that's what was it a demand problem or is it a supply problem? I think we have to blame ourselves, both demand and supply. We discovered what our ancestors did. I think that's what we need to start telling people, that we need to go back and see how we have lived sustainably.
Yeah, that is fascinating because it's actually going back in history and going back to what we did and capturing what we did to bring it to present day. So Kevin, this brings me neatly onto a question for yourself. We talk about SDG 17. We talk about partnerships. We talk about the United Nations trying to get a holistic approach to share best practices. But then looking through the lens of nature-based solutions, how do we get this cross-sector collaboration? And what role can universities and youth networks such as the Green Talent Award play in advancing these models to sort of at a community level?
So it's an interesting question. I mean, I think, if we look at the role of universities, in addition to, the obvious one, sort of capacity building and building the right skills, both in terms of kind of the hard skills, I would say, in terms of the technical capabilities, the business skills, the financial skills. I think universities can go a lot further. And in fact, there are very good examples where they are going further. So, for example, assisting new businesses to address sort of the kind of typical technology and resource constraints that a young kind of emerging business might face. So universities often have, additional technologies that they can use to assist, new ventures. They can often assist new ventures to access capital where that wouldn't be necessarily the case without that type of support. I think universities and research institutions also play a very key role in, fundamentally, research for natural capital projects, it's actually strange how much we rely on fundamental research. So, the scientists at the universities play a critical role in providing that kind of infrastructure, the base knowledge that we use to construct nature-based solution projects. Often universities would actually come up with fresh new approaches, so in collaboration with students, new technologies, new approaches, whether that be, I remember looking at approaches of using, algal ponding systems to treat effluent in a very cost-effective and kind of call it low technology way, but low technology in the sense that it was suitable for remote context, didn't require very expensive parts, wasn't difficult to fix if something went wrong. But these type of technologies have been promoted by universities, and the universities often have the capabilities of, working with young entrepreneurs to demonstrate through pilot projects, these types of fresh approaches to things. And also kind of spinning out of universities, often we see these innovation hubs, and you get, very exciting new technologies emerging out of these hubs. And I think those innovation hubs play, a critical role in the green economy as a whole, but also in, nature-based solutions. In the type of work we're involved in, we see a lot of, AI-powered analytical tools coming directly out of universities. So, master's students have taken what they did as their master's thesis and actually, through the assistance of the universities, starting to commercialize these very, very exciting tools, which are, becoming more and more critical as nature-based solution projects become more, mainstream.
Thanks, Kevin. And that brings me on to another question, really, for Faisal. Look, we realise that a lot of opportunities are driven by legislation, are driven by regulation. So, for example, companies having to reduce their carbon footprint, companies having to minimize their waste, improve their recycling rates and recovery, individuals having to change their behaviors and habits. And when we look at nature-based solutions, the conservation requirements, the restoration requirements, the creation of wetlands, the creation of more biodiversity, more green open spaces, a lot of it's driven by policy. So the innovators, the entrepreneurs put their hat in the ring because they say, I can get subsidized for doing this. I can get some funding to support this. But where do you see the gaps in policy, the restrictions in policy for what are the challenges for youth in terms of making a difference?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there are a number of policy gaps. And I think the biggest one is what you and Kevin already talked about, is the financing, access to finance. We don't have any policies where the government or the policymakers have initiative to specifically support green innovation, resolving local problems, sustainable problem. So I think one of the big gap is we don't currently have any policy where the government or policymakers give entrepreneurs to give access to credit and resolve. And a lot of these entrepreneurs from this, especially the emerging market, they don't have a track record or credit history or something. So they do struggle when they come up with sort of non-traditional solutions, and traditional banks tend to reject such initiative because it's not tested, it's not proven business model. So I think that's one of the areas I would say that we still have problems. I think
Right.
there are also issues with, if governments are unwilling to take the risk, they should have a policy where they encourage private-public partnerships. So it could be private public universities along with private entrepreneurs coming up with the product or solution, and the government provide the funding in order to reduce the risk, so that there is an academic, rigorous scientific evidence behind all these new ideas. So I think these are the two areas I would say where there are still policy gaps.
Right. So very much on the how these projects fund themselves, how they finance themselves, the mechanisms by which they exploit. So you talked about partnerships, but partnerships using maybe private finance initiatives, public-private partnerships, mechanisms, sort of structuring the deals in a very corporate financial way. That's really interesting for our audience. That maybe they don't realise that not only do you have to have a sort of business case, but like any business, you've got to look at the way it sustainably funds itself and how it finances itself. And is it a funding issue you've got? Is it a finance issue that you've got? Later on in this series of webinars, we'll talk about social impact bonds and different mechanisms to fund. We'll talk about crowdfunding. We'll talk about the different equity arrangements and the way to structure deals. So all something very hopefully to provide enlightening to our sort of what we call our green ambassadors. But coming on to the risk now, Kevin, we hear about ESG, we hear about it at corporate level, and we know that governance is a big requirement, and the social impacts, the social benefits. We know about the ethics of how we do things. We know about the environmental aspects in terms of consideration. But in terms of ventures that are sort of youth-led ventures, where do you see the potential pitfalls of, and how can our learners better prepare themselves to understand ESG, understand how it gets measured, understand the metrics behind it, understand what they need to consider when they're setting up their own ventures?
So I think from a general ESG risk management perspective, I mean, the internet is full of good resources. I think, if you were to go to the websites of, some of the development finance institutions, the World Bank, IFC, a lot of these institutions are required to publish the details, or at least a summary of the types of ventures that they support on their website. So it's public information. I mean, the beauty about these summaries is that they actually generally cover a huge array of different investment types. But also these documents tend to detail the types of risks that are likely to be expected with different venture types, and also the mitigation measures that the proponents have put in place. So I think there's a lot of free internet information that's particularly relevant to assessing and mitigating ESG risks. I think in addition to the kind of normal risk, or I would call them more conventional risks, I think, there's a few that are becoming, increasingly important, and maybe a little bit less obvious. But, things like, for example, data security and data privacy, I think particularly with sort of some of the tech-based applications or businesses around tech-based applications where, for example, you might be using an app or technology platform to connect perhaps small scale farmers in a remote area with markets or buyers in the city centers. I think a lot of these applications require kind of personal data, contact details, and there's increasing awareness around this sort of sensitivity of managing that data, and quite often something that's overlooked, certainly in investments that we look at. I think also typically risk assessments would focus on the direct operations of a business, and those are generally more easy to identify, assess, and mitigate. Where people are starting to pay closer attention now is in the supply chains. So if there is a green initiative that's involves some sort of supply chain, and that might be something, if you think about sort of an aquaculture venture, sustainable aquaculture, sustainable farming practices, you need to look very carefully into the supply chain, particularly where you've got more complicated supply chains, not that easy to track where all of the different raw materials come from, and there's potential for significant reputational risk in supply chains. And I think the final factor that's becoming really important, and I think this is, maybe obvious, is the ability of a new venture to withstand climate change risk. So, in terms of being credible, I think it's important for new business owners or developers to, look very carefully at how their business could be affected by climate change, and, make sure that the mitigation measures, are in place.
Yeah, and Kevin, that climate change risk and the impact it has on some of our ecological systems for example, in the rainforests, in the mangroves, in the wetlands, in those green habitats. We really are having an impact, and you see it firsthand of how air pollution, water pollution, the harm that we're doing to habitat, and the harm we're doing to the ecological systems, and the imbalance that we are creating in biodiversity. So the question in an audience that we have online, and something that Faisal mentioned, we need to go back in time and look and talk to the people that live in these communities. How do you see the integration of indigenous or local ecological knowledge enhancing the impact of these nature-based solutions designed by youth? How are you integrating with these communities to learn from them on how we can protect some of our ecology?
So I think, tapping into, traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous knowledge is, it's really important from in terms of developing, nature-based solution type projects. Effectively, these are solutions that are based on a very deep understanding of ecological systems. So, that tapping into that type of knowledge, and, addressing the gaps. I mean, certainly, call it Western science is certainly imperfect. And, many of the locations where nature-based solutions are found are, in fact, in areas where, definitely there are sort of gaps in Western knowledge. And particularly talking about sort of, ecological processes that, a lot of the nature-based solution projects, rely on. It's really important to ensure that there's, social equity and culturally appropriate interventions. I think particularly around understanding, the long-term effects of climate change, seasonal changes. Local communities obviously often have or very often have a very, very acute understanding or sense of how things have changed. I was in the field not so long ago talking with farmers, and they're saying, well, the rainfall pattern has shifted by 1 year. The dry season is becoming 1 month longer over the last 10 years. So this type of very localized knowledge can be really critical to the success of a nature-based solution project. And I think also in terms of the types of practices happening on the ground, there's a lot of really context-specific approaches. So, for example, if you look at farming practices within a specific context, these have typically been developed over thousands of years, and there's a reason why they're done in a certain way. I think, like you were saying earlier, that sometimes these have been overlooked, and it's important to go back and say, well, maybe what we had proposed for a project is not necessarily the best way to do things. Let's look at how the local communities have approached the same types of things, and see how we can. I think it's a case of optimizing. So how we can involve local communities, understand the local context better in order to optimize the impacts that we can get out of a nature-based solution project.
Excellent. And Kevin, leading on to that, we've talked about innovation, we've talked about nature-based projects and how we need to fund them and finance them and support them and enable them. But occasionally across your desk, you'll come across green entrepreneurs, whether they're young or whether they're old. And we, as a sort of analyst, we're looking obviously for positive impact, and they've got to make a difference. But what key determinants do you look for? We look for viability, we look for feasibility, obviously, but in terms of scalability and that ability to sustain the business model, what are the determinants that you look for in a proposition in a sustainable project for it to be scalable and for it to sustain itself?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think from a scalability perspective, there's really probably two components, and it may be a little bit simplistic, but I think firstly to understand the expected need, and that's an immediate need, and then the likely growth of a particular need for a product or a service, over time. So that's, I guess, the one side of the equation, and the other side of the equation is, let's assume there's a strong need. And that need is likely to grow. What's the ability of that project team to meet these growth demands? And that in itself is quite a complex issue, and I think it's a lot of the things we discussed before. But being able to meet the demand means being able to scale up operations, being able to access the adequate financing to grow those operations. Being able to having the right human resources skills to be able to, recruit the right people, grow a bigger team successfully without losing. I think sometimes what gets lost is some of the success factors that were around in the very early days of the small business. Sometimes, it is possible that they get lost unless that kind of scale up is done properly. So, yeah, I think in terms of scalability, those two factors. Sustainability, slightly more challenging. I think, yes, you're right that, obviously looking at the impact and, being able to demonstrate a positive impact, being able to demonstrate good financial case, that's very important. I think the other thing that is important to consider is also, whether the risks have been, assessed properly, because, some of these risks, if you have a business that's relying on a strong reputation for sustainability, and for example, I talked earlier about supply chains, you can imagine that if there's a risk comes out and, some bad press on the supply chain for a project, that can be incredibly damaging from a reputational perspective. And, often it's really difficult for a growing business to recover from some of those, that reputational damage. So, I think sustainability side, yes, make sure that you maximize the impacts, but on the other side also make sure that you understand and you mitigate and you very carefully monitor, the risk side of things.
Yeah, and I'd like to sort of come in on my penny's worth on this. I think what I've seen, I don't know if you agree, Kevin, or you might have a different viewpoint. We look at sustainability, we look at business on scale and scalability. We look at it on the basis that it's got to be scalable. Yet what we're realizing, some comment that Faisal made, in agricultural terms, we've always looked at having to do it on a large scale. But historically, from a social benefit, it was done on a small scale. So it provided a livelihood to communities. And so sustainability, sometimes it's a dichotomy. We need to look at it maybe not on scalability terms, but maybe on the social impact it does for a community, like looking at transitional towns. And I'll give you an example as an innovation. Pyrolysis and thermal cracking can only really be looked at and accessed if it's large scale. You have to have the feedstock. It's significant capital investment. And a young entrepreneur recently challenged that and tried to do it on a small scale as a point for diversification for a farmer, and was able to demonstrate that you can do these things on small scales, and then it becomes the sum of the parts. So that's an interesting sort of bit of academic research in sustainability. challenging whether we need to be looking at scalability or whether we should be looking at it through the lens of the sum of the parts, and it doesn't necessarily provide that scalability for one organization or one enterprise, but it's something that is done for the benefit of the community, and it can be transferred to another community for them to take on. So that's something that we might sort of go into debate in another webinar. Any viewpoint on that, Kevin?
No, I mean, I think part of the role that I play is obviously to look very closely at impact, and it's actually quite difficult to gauge, to put a number. So the impact of a particular investment is, somewhere between 1 and 10. I think it's not that simple. I think, like you're saying, I think it very much also depends on the context. So creation of 10 jobs, if there was creation of 10 jobs in London, perhaps not that significant. Creation of 10 jobs in a remote area where there's very few other opportunities for economic income generation. Those 10 jobs highly significant. And if you look at multiplier factors and all the rest of it, so yeah, I think it's not all about scale. I think you can have impact without having massive scale. But yeah, very, very context specific.
Yeah, and we find this with the grant bids as well. You'll find that some of in the sort of certain, like the UK, for example, the main criteria is how many jobs will this proposition create.
Yeah.
But in terms of sustainability, that is not always the case. Last question. Thank you very much, Kevin. That sort of concludes the questions for you. I hope that's been a benefit to our audience today. A final question to wrap this up with Faisal. You're leading a Southeast Asian focused research centre at Leeds University. Maybe it's a good idea to explain what that is all about. But can you share some of the examples of youth or student-led sustainability ideas that have impressed you, Faisal, and particularly through the lens of your research centre at Leeds, which has been focusing on the geographical location of Southeast Asia?
Thank you, Rob. Last year in July, I was in India, and I was delivering a module on ESG and sustainability. And the project that the students had to work is, the campus is massive. There's got about 12,000 students in the campus. What they were asked to do is, within 4 hours, they have to find all the plastic bottles which are laying around the campus, and then meet the module leaders, including me, in one of the specific location where we have provided them with some fertilizer, and they had to insert the fertilizer in the bottle, and then they have to create a hole where they have to plant a tree. And there was about 150 of them, which we used to create a hanging garden. So the idea was that they will have an idea how much plastic waste is in the campus and find alternative use, which will be the main message that we wanted to send, that we every day, every minute, we create so much unsustainable practices that leads to sustainable issues, starting with their campus, then thinking about their home, their community, their city, and the country. So that's one of the most interesting projects I have done recently with students from IIM University in Greater Noida near Delhi. We have plans to do more through Edupro Green Talent Award. We not only want to encourage students to come up with solutions, but as we have discussed with you, Rob, that we want to fund this project so that they can implement those projects, especially those who will reach the top 3 position in the 2026 Green Talent Award. And we would like to provide a sort of a crowdfunding opportunities. And maybe with you and Kevin, we can come up with a model where we can fund this project so that they can kickstart the project, and we provide the seed funding. And then they can use those funding to start the project and attract further funding in their home country or globally. So I think that would be the next interesting project that I would like to do with you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you both, Kevin and Faisal, for those questions. I'm sorry that that we sort of haven't prepared you. Sometimes it's best to just let it flow and ask questions and based on your answers, frame a new question. So I hope that's been a benefit, and we could spend a lot of time talking about the things that you've revealed, and this is going to lead on to these other series of webinars. So what Kevin and what Faisal have provided you as some of their viewpoints and their answers, we're going to go into more detail, for example, on ESG, nature-based solutions, sustainable funding, sustainable finance, later on in our series of webinars that support the Green Talent Award programme. And I know that provides some very useful CPD, and we'll be introducing new specialists as well when we host these webinars. So now we're just going to put on the screen the next series of slides, which will be talking about our previous 2025 programme and what came out of it. And it will give us a timeline to what we will be doing on the 2026 Green Talent Award programme. If you could put the slides up, that would be great. Meanwhile, I can see lots of questions on the community, and these are the type of questions that we can share with yourselves, and we'll come back, and obviously we'll be able to provide some answers to some of the questions that you've raised. So please continue to ask questions on the community. Have we got the slides, Fakrul?
Yeah, can you see the slides?
Oh, yes, I can see them. Okay, we've got the slides. Okay, just to introduce that this Green Talent Award programme has various rounds. We're going to be releasing in March 2026 the case studies. This will be round one. We have a submission deadline at the end of March, and the results will be announced on the 10th of April. We then move through the various rounds, round two, round three, and you can see when we release these various cases, and we'll have themes. The themes will be on climate change. There'll be themes on waste management and minimization, for example. And then we will very shortly after the submission deadlines, we will be announcing the results. And this is a team-based submissions. And then finally, we get to the final round, round three, and then we will have determined the finalists. We're hoping, as our main sponsor, and I'm sure this is happening, our main sponsor, Leeds University, through Faisal, will be hosting this event. It was a very successful event in 2026, and we'll be having a hybrid of allowing those that aren't able to join us in person to be involved in this effectively a conference where we will announce the winner and the finalists, and we will be giving you some feedback. So participation countries, very extensive, over 50 countries. It's the network that you develop. It's the unintended outcome that you as professionals through your LinkedIn platforms will actually start to share best practice. And this is an unintended outcome of the Green Talent Award program, is that we're creating a very strong green network. We're making significant gains, hopefully, and we need to capture these at a later date. So join us. You can join us through our sponsor interest. So if you're representing a company or an institution, you may be interested in sponsoring this. And also, if you're on the call today and you want to register with your team and enter the Green Talent Award program, you can do so. Next slide, please. And so the Green Talent Award, why sponsor it? Well, we've talked about ESG. We've talked about sort of positioning ourselves. I won't talk about greenwashing because that's something I don't want to talk about. But we do have an ethical consideration that we support ventures like this because we can actually seem to be doing good. And it fits into some of our strategic intent in our KPIs, that we can demonstrate that we are not only making profits and investment returns for our shareholders, but we're also being able to do good for the community. And we can do that by giving skills to young green ambassadors and young learners. And we can provide knowledge exposure and share best practice. So there's a lot that organizations can get out of this, whether they are educational or whether they are practitioner-based and producing products, services, or even consultancy. So the message is simple. We want you to be part of it. In terms of sponsorship, there's various levels. You can operate at the sustainability champion level, and you can have a prominent position in supporting this, and there's various benefits that you can get from this. And then we can have a regional partner. We can have themed sponsorship, so you can actually look at a certain theme. So if you're an organization that takes a real interest in waste management and waste minimization, recycling, recovery, upcycling, and you're creating products, that you could sponsor that theme. Or you might be sponsoring a theme in climate change and nature-based solutions. You can be a knowledge-based, so this could be in a university or an institution that you want to maybe create knowledge transfer program opportunities. You can be a team sponsor, so even as learners, we can actually put our efforts into contribution through participation. And you can be a patron, a recognition that you continue to support this as a green ambassador. So we can all get involved. The message is at different levels. And so it's about joining us. It's about building a green future. We had a fantastic 2026 engagement, and resulted in a lot of individuals that either participated, sponsored, supported, got a significant amount out of this. And it's enjoyable. It's sustainability is one of those things that it's not a chore. It has meaning to us as individuals. It has meaning to us in the acquiring of skills, and it's meaningful to us if we have careers, or we want to be entrepreneurs, or we want to be involved in organizations. We can all make a significant input, and what we're finding is that there are benefits financially, there are benefits non-financially, and there's also this ability to say, do you know what? I've done good. I've actually made a difference. Next slide, please. So, help us build a greener future. It's you that make the difference. It's the people on the call today. It's making a difference for your country. It's making a difference for your community, your organization, and continue to support us. You will make the difference. Thank you very much. It's been thank you particularly for Fakrul, who has organized and project manages the Green Talenter program along with his team. And thank you at the forefront of this, Kevin, who sits very much in the on the side of practitioner-based solutions, and as in the arena of consultation, and also academically in the research that Fakrul's team does at Leeds University. So I hope you've enjoyed this webinar, but please bear in mind, this is just the start. Over to you, Fakrul.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Kevin and Faisal. We are receiving questions, though we have already passed our time, scheduled time.
I'll leave these to you, Fakrul. If you could pass those questions on to Kevin and Faisal.
Yeah, I'm just making one question. I think this is very interesting. What is the place of conflicts, poverty, and illiteracy in sustainability innovation? So there are a lot of conflicts and going on over the world. In different parts of the world, poverty is the main thing, and people are not literate and all about. So what is the place of these three one of the participants' questions in sustainability innovation. So I think there are links, right? So how do you describe this?
I'll start, then I will leave. Ask Kevin and Rob to interpret. I think when you say poverty, you are looking at economic poverty, or if it is referring to income, a higher living standard, then and then you're looking at access to education. That's part of the little. But when we talk about sustainability, we are not just talking about the environment. Sustainability covers everything, including our education, our health, our well-being, and then also looking after the environment. So I don't see there is an issue here, but the issue is how we are trying to solve the poverty and education problem today, where the primary objective is to get a job through different type of investments, economic growth, but that those growth are creating environmental damages, which is affecting the health and the well-being. So we are in a vicious circle where we create our own problems. How do we get out of it? I think that's one of the Rob's question is we need to look at how our ancestors lived with the environment, with the nature, and they used the nature and lived a healthy life without compromising the quality of their life. So they had fresh air, fresh food, good health. And if you say that education is about getting university degrees, a lot of our ancestors didn't have those education, but they had a good life. So I think we need to first of all understand when we say poverty, when we say education, growth, development, what are we talking about? Because these are the main problems for the issues we are facing today, the so-called development and growth. So I would say that I would like to see that there is no conflict here. It's actually going to be a solution where we live with the nature like our ancestors did. Thank you. Kevin or Rob?
No, I would concur exactly with that. I think the main thing is the expedience of what we're doing. We tend to create a lot of talking shops in organisations, and really it's the doing side of it now. Social mobility, as you said, to education is a real issue, and the sort of not just the funding and finance gap, but the access of people to be able to make a difference. We need to enable individuals to make a difference and not put regulation, restriction on what they do. And I think the biggest challenge, unfortunately now, is the expedience of what we're doing, because we are doing a lot of harm. There's no doubt about that. Socially, environmentally, and economically, the three pillars of sustainability, we are doing a lot of harm. And it's now we are restricting enterprise to, and we are putting hurdles, barriers in front of organizations, companies through regulation. And what we really need to be doing is enabling and making it easier to make a difference.
I think the potential opportunity for conflict always exists. I think where you're dealing with a power dynamic where you have potentially very sophisticated project developers interacting with communities that are let's say perhaps not as literate. I think by and large, developers in the space, in the green economy, have the right values and the right ethics. But as is always the case, there will be some that don't necessarily follow the same track. And there is opportunity to exploit, local communities. These are the types of, situations that, are raised in The Guardian periodically, and can, really create reputational problems for what is otherwise, a very good and a very necessary shift in the way we think about business and how we can bring in green business. So I think to some extent it's also part of the responsibility of the investors to do the necessary checks to make sure that all parties and all stakeholders involved in these kind of initiatives are actually being treated fairly, and that that the benefits of these projects are actually shared equitably. And you see this type of thing coming out in the new standards governing best practices, that there should be equitable benefit sharing. So I think as investors, that's part of our role to make sure that we support the right types of projects.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Kevin. So thank you very much. We need to close it very soon. So before completing, we are just make sure that for the audience, we are regularly organizing the webinars. Or as you know already, we have started the Green Talent Awards 2026. So team registration is now on. We have send the registration link, and also we will share the presentation slides and the recording with you very soon. So you will get more details about the event as a whole. So we are requesting everyone to keep eye on our website, www.eduprouk.com. Also, kindly visit our LinkedIn page and social media pages. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye for today.
Thank you, Fakrul. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care. Bye-bye.
www.eduprouk.com